Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arab TV, and I'm your host, Zaid Faransso. One more time. Our guests today are the very interesting Zahra Billoo, the Executive Director of the Council of American Islamic Relations in San Francisco and the Bay Area. Welcome, glad to have you here. And Ismael, Nass, the Speaker of the Islamic Network Group, ING. Glad to have you here both. Thank you for coming, and thank you for giving us the honor of your speech.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So, we're currently in the holy month of Ramadan.
Yes.
This is what we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, what is this month? And we'll start with you, Zahra. What is the month of Ramadan? What is the significance of this month?
Sure. In short, the way I explain Ramadan to people is that it's the 9th month of the Islamic lunar calendar. And during this month, Muslims across the world fast from sunrise to sunset. So that means that they abstain from food, water, and any sort of intake into their body. And the idea is that it gives us a sense of empathy for what people who are going hungry for lack of choice. So people who are homeless, people who don't have food, gives us empathy for what they're experiencing. It creates an opportunity for us to focus on developing self-control and then also to build charity in the community. And that's a summary of it, but that's how I explain it to people in passing. And essentially it means these days 16 hours of no drink and no food.
All right. It will sound hard when you first say it. Right. Ismael, I'll move to you and I'll take a step back in history. Zahra just mentioned what we perceive of Ramadan at the moment. Yeah. How did that develop? How did it start? How did people start to embrace it? And why do people embrace it?
Well, Ramadan is a pillar of the religion of Islam, one of the pillars, and it's a requirement for every Muslim, able Muslim, and there are technical definitions I'm not going to get into right now. But it is a requirement for Muslims basically to fast during that month. It is an important month for Muslims because it's the month in which the Quran, the Muslims' holy book, was revealed. And it's a month actually in which other revelations were revealed, like the scrolls of Prophet Abraham, the Torah, the Gospel, and the Psalms. According to Islam or Islamic theologians and people who interpret the Quran, the Quran was revealed. These other books were also revealed during the month of Ramadan. The only difference is that in the case of Islam, the first verse was revealed to Prophet Muhammad, first verses during the month of Ramadan, and then later the Quran was revealed over a period of 23 years. So that's something to note about Ramadan. It's not just also the month of Quran, but of divine revelation.
So we're talking about a tradition that has been going on for how long? 1400 years right now, and a pillar of faith that people commit to. Back to you, Zahra. What is let's say, the cut point? What is the base of people who are mandated to fast? Or is everybody called for this?
Sure. So Ismael referred to able-bodied Muslims, and I agree there's probably a number of technical conversations we could have about that. But the way we explain it in lay people's terms is adult Muslims. So anyone who has reached the age of puberty, male or female, is believed to be obligated to participate in the fast. There are numerous exceptions, and this goes back to your point about how it sounds really hard, but we believe that God is merciful, and so that there are exceptions so that it is not a danger or an inconvenience, but rather a trial that you engage in willfully. So women who are pregnant, women who are nursing, people who are sick, people who are traveling, and a number of other sort of types of people who are experiencing difficulties are accepted from fasting. And the idea is that it should never be something that puts you or your body in danger. And so that's why there's a lot of flexibility there.
And what about the technicalities? I know I might be familiar with it, a lot of our spectators might be familiar with it, but let's just throw some of those fine details. Fasting is from...
So it's from the first light of dawn. So it's not, I actually said sunrise, and that's how we refer to it casually, but it's about an hour or so before sunrise even. So the first light of dawn is when Muslims they'll wake up in the morning and they'll stop eating before the first light of dawn. And so if you're like me, you're barely awake, you're trying to find water, but people will have entire elaborate meals if they can wake up in time. And then the entire course of the daytime, no food, no water, no medicine. If there is medicine that you couldn't go without, for example, then you'd be accepted from fasting. No sexual intercourse. So nothing that would be considered a physical desire should be fulfilled. And the idea is that you develop that self-control. The example I always give to Bay Area residents is imagine driving on the 880 without any food or water in the middle of rush hour, because what you're supposed to do after developing that physical control is also develop the emotional control and the spiritual control. And so you can't get mad at the driver who cuts you off on that miserable freeway when you're fasting. And so this goes all the way until sunset. And at sunset, Muslims will traditionally break their fast with dates and milk, and then that'll be followed by a full meal. And this becomes difficult in the summer times because you started at 4:30 in the morning and sunset isn't until 8:30. People will also again have elaborate meals, and a lot of community activists try to remind each other to focus on the spirit of the month. And that means that you shouldn't go for 16 hours and then gorge yourself on food, but rather that you should intake in moderation. The sunset fast breaking is followed by longer than usual evening prayers, which are called the Tarawih prayer. So Muslims pray 5 times a day, and the Tarawih prayer happens after the nighttime prayer. And at some mosques in the Bay Area, it can go until past midnight, and people are spending their time reciting the Quran in the prayer with the attempt of reading the entire Quran through the 30 nights of prayer. And so every night they'll read one part or 1/30th of the Quran. And so it also fosters a sense of community because you're sharing food and prayers with people that maybe you haven't seen in months.
Right. So you give us a very nice glimpse. You took us away from those technicalities about not having food from this time to that time and not doing this and not doing that, something that sounds more like the books of law, into a more spiritual experience. I very much admired that picture that you gave about driving on 880 without any food.
Yeah.
And it will be a challenge for me or for anybody who does that line of commute every day.
Right.
The fact that you have to get over not just your desires for food, but your desires for getting angry. You should cut on bad language, you should cut on lust, you should cut on gossiping and all the bad things. And if you throw in with that a lot of prayer, a lot of spiritual, let's say, approaches, that will translate the month into a whole different spiritual experiment.
Right. People sometimes compare it to like a boot camp. So if I'm trying to get in shape, I'll go to a boot camp at the gym for maybe 10 to 20 days, and what I learn in that intense period should help me stay fit for the rest of the year. And so Ramadan can be both a physical and a spiritual boot camp. I learn to control my physical desires, and I learn to invest in my spirituality. And so it's sort of like after a whole month of intense practice, I spend the next 11 months utilizing what I learned and the skills that I honed in that month.
I love that idea, which is a call out to people who are not really into the teachings of the religion to embrace this experience, this experiment as a sort of spiritual cleansing, as a trial, as an exercise of spirituality, or for to strip themselves off all those earthly desires and try a month. Right? 30 days?
Yeah, absolutely 30
29
days.
or 30, depending
or
on
take.
Depending on the moon.
So we're depending on the lunar calendar.
Right.
Just trying to make this clear to some of the spectators. We're measuring this according to the lunar calendar, and it follows the Hijri year, which is a calendar of 12 months. Each month is about 29 to 30 days.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why Ramadan can come in different times of the year. It basically shifts for
about 10 days every year, and so it continues to move up simply because we don't have 31-day months in the lunar calendar. And so, for example, when I was growing up, I experienced Ramadan in December, and so now as an adult, I'm experiencing it in July. And so, 10 days every year is where it progresses.
Nice. Now, I'll try to get an idea, and I'm giving this question to Ismael, because I had this short conversation with you before, and I know that you've seen Ramadan in other parts of the world. You've actually experienced it in its actual origins. I want you to give me a snapshot of how does this idea that we just talked about sound, look, feel, smell in other parts of the world?
Well, certainly, this other part of the world is Saudi Arabia. I'm from Syria. I grew up in Syria, but I lived in Saudi Arabia for some time. And in Saudi Arabia, and that applies to other countries, all Muslim countries, the culture, the system accommodates Ramadan. And so hours change, working hours change. Additionally, you feel the spirituality of the month in the country, because obviously everybody's preparing for it, everybody's experiencing it. People are feeding the poor, are helping the needy. So you feel there is a great sense of spirituality that prevails during that month. Additionally, the mosques are filled with people performing their prayers, whether during the day or during the night prayers. Because during Ramadan, a lot of people kind of come back to God. There are those who most of the year are, just busy with life, and then when Ramadan comes, then they become more encouraged to show up at the mosque.
It's a wake-up call.
It's a wake-up call. And what Ramadan does, it breaks the routine. So, you're going through your daily life every month, and then suddenly there's this month where you have to stop eating and drinking during the day, light hours, no more snack attacks during the daylight hours. And so you need to start disciplining yourself and try to make sure that oneself is following the spirit of Ramadan that Zahra has mentioned. Because it's not about just abstaining from eating and drinking. It's a spiritual experience. It's about abstaining from argumentation, from belligerence, the things that people should abstain from anyway. But during the month of Ramadan, it's even more important that people don't commit sins. And so there's this spirituality. There are other aspects of it that are not necessarily that follow the spirit of Ramadan, because people lately, this is what I'm being told, when I was there it wasn't happening, but in different countries people are starting to have suhoor parties, where they invite people for the early morning meal before dawn. That wasn't the case before. People did that in their own homes. Now people go to restaurants and they spend 2 or 3 hours leading up to the time when they break the fast. So generally speaking, it's more spiritual as compared to here, because for people in America, Ramadan is just another day or another month. People don't obviously recognize Ramadan unless somebody tell them about it, but there's nothing special. And so there is difference, but in a way, being here kind of forces you to kind of follow the spirit of Ramadan, because Ramadan is a highly productive month spiritually, and also when it comes to worldly affairs, one going without food is able to be more focused on their job, or if it's learning, be able to be more focused on learning, because in the Islamic tradition is actually it's actually recommended for students of knowledge to study on empty stomachs.
Really?
So.
Okay, I'm going to ask about a specific point you mentioned. When you were talking about Ramadan in Saudi Arabia or in the Islamic nation in general, you said they tweak the day to accommodate Ramadan. What kind of changes are we looking at?
For example, and I say that from my experience, like my father used to, his schedule changed where he's worked later in the morning, so instead of going to work at 8, it was maybe at 9, and then would go back earlier than usual. But then he has like a couple hours after sunset, after people eat, like maybe from 8 to 10, something like that.
And these are like government businesses,
well,
not just private.
In this case, I'm talking about private business. My father was a legal advisor for a company, and that was the schedule they had. I don't remember the exact hours, but what I remember is that maybe from 7 to 9, depending on when the sunset was, from 7 to 9 p.m., he used to go back to work, instead of during normal hours, maybe from like 2 to 5 or something like that. So they cut a little bit on working hours, and they probably push some of the working hours towards the night, like after people had an opportunity to break their fast, so it's easier on them.
All right. Zahra, you're the person who's been here all her life. You've adopted the traditions of Ramadan, both spiritual and earthly, through living with your family, through education, and through your spiritual growth. Now I need you to give us the same snapshot of Ramadan in San Francisco.
Ramadan in San Francisco is, so it's something that I've been experiencing for about 7 years now. I grew up in Southern California, and my experience is that it's not everyone around you is fasting, right? So different from what people see in Pakistan or in Saudi Arabia, and it's almost like it creates an opportunity to have conversations about your faith, about why you're skipping that lunch meal, or why you're watching all of your coworkers eat and not actually eating yourself. Other faiths in the United States do experience fasting in different ways. So for example, the Jewish community has a 24-hour fast that they do once a year. And so that's a very different experience just because the timeline is different. But people are familiar with the concept. And so there are some, I think, college students who do have the suhoor parties, the pre-dawn parties, because they're 17 and they're 18 and their bodies can tolerate doing that. But people go about their daily lives unless you work in an incredibly flexible nonprofit, or your company is Muslim owned, it's going to be the case that you generally keep your regular schedule. And so for the first few days, that means adjusting to life without coffee, because you still have to be at work at 8 a.m., but you don't have your Starbucks or your Peet's coffee fix. You go home at 5 or 6, and then people even here do tend to look for family and friends to break their fasts with, and so people will gather with others. It's always nice to eat with company. A lot of the mosques in the area cater to single Muslims and traveling Muslims, people who maybe don't have families to go to. So a lot of the major mosques in the Bay Area and across California actually host daily meals, and so they fundraise and get people to sponsor these meals. Muslims believe that there's an additional special reward for feeding someone who was fasting. And so, for example, at the MCA in Santa Clara, there's a meal every night, and so people always have somewhere to go. And then you stay at the mosque. Whether if you ate at home, you come to the mosque. If you ate at the mosque, then you stay at the mosque, and you'll have prayers there. But people really also celebrate it in their own ways. I mean, some people don't go to the mosque. They prefer to just spend time with the family and friends. Some people spend every night at the mosque. So growing up, my father actually refused all social invitations because it was important for him to focus on his worship. And so we were at the mosque every night of that month.
And that was the spiritual prayer you mentioned in the
Correct.
beginning. We call Taraweeh.
Taraweeh. And so we'd actually go there for the iftar, so for the fast breaking meal, and we'd stay there till Taraweeh, and then we'd come home and go right to bed. And these days, with the days so long, you break your fast at about 8:30. By the time you're done with Taraweeh prayers, it's about 12:30. You want to get home and go to sleep and wake back up the next morning at 4 a.m. So it is a very tight schedule.
Okay, I'm really attracted to this idea that a lot of people might not see, but I just caught from your talk right now. So mosques, Taraweeh prayers, fasting, is a chance to bring the family together.
Correct.
It's not just an individual effort. It's not something you do on your own. Even mosques are family-friendly places where you can take your whole family.
Absolutely. I mean, the idea is, so the obligation of fasting is individual, but it's so much more enjoyable and beneficial if you can do it with others, right? So even, for example, waking up for the morning meal, it's difficult to wake up at 4 a.m. if you're doing it by yourself, but if you're doing it with family and friends, it can become a communal thing where you provide support for each other. In that same way with the mosques, they recognize that, people don't want to eat alone, or maybe they're traveling, or maybe they have various situations, and so they want to create this environment of community. I tell my friends that it's like Christmas dinner 30 days in a row, that's the spirit that it attempts to foster.
Your biggest challenge? My
biggest challenge is, in the first couple of days, it's the coffee. And then towards the end of the month, as I really sort of embrace the traditions and get a hold of it, it's just
detox.
Right. But once you get past the detox, you feel great, and you realize you don't need these things that you're putting into your body. But then in the second half of the month, I think sometimes it just becomes dealing with exhaustion because the days can be so long, and you want to do well at work, you want to spend time with family, and you also really want to focus on your spirituality.
Ismael, your comparison between what you pictured to us in the first snapshot and what you're living today in the Bay Area and San Francisco area?
It is safe to say that it is easier to fast or observe Ramadan in a Muslim country for obvious reasons. However, I've had actually an excellent experience observing the fast here. Actually, because I have to maintain the same schedule and so on and so forth, then I'm kind of in a mental state where I have to accommodate the month of Ramadan. I have to do everything that I need to do to observe the month of Ramadan properly.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm able to be productive, and so there's no excuse for me to say, okay, it's Ramadan, then I can kind of lay back. So from my perspective, it's been a good experience from that aspect, from that point of view. However, I still miss the family gatherings that we used to have to break the fast.
Community.
So the sense of community is here. We have it here. Actually, you have it here in a way that's not. We didn't have it in, for example, Saudi Arabia or Syria, because we tend to go to the mosque, for example, to break the fast, and you get to sit down with people. While usually back home we used to, have private gatherings. All is good, but here it's more community-based, more community-centered, centered around the community. So you have that experience that you feel it more here than there, because even though everything is available there, but people who are settled in Saudi Arabia or Syria usually have their own private groups, and which is not bad. It's family getting together. So here, because we don't have the distant family members around, so our family is really the community.
Yeah.
So.
And I'll ask you the same question. What's your biggest challenge during the holy month?
My biggest challenge is really to live up to the promise or the premise of the month of Ramadan, because I'm supposed to increase in my, we call it taqwa, and it's a state that you reach by abandoning that which is unlawful and following that which is commanded by the religion.
In some sort of a non-literal way, holiness.
Righteousness. Try to, also achieve excellence in moral character, and also trying to do extra acts of worship like the prayer, the night prayer, and also reading the Quran, the entire Quran, this month. So trying to achieve, that's the challenge. For me, food and drink is not an issue.
Not a really big issue.
Yeah.
And because we don't like to give the people an impression that this is really a negative thing, and we're asking only about challenges, what's your favorite part of the holy month?
The favorite part of the holy month is really the night prayers. Depending on, there is the night prayer, and also there are the gatherings around food to break the fast. Yeah. So.
And Zahra, your favorite part of the month?
I think it's actually the challenge that Ismael mentioned. I was thinking about this, and it's the idea of living up to the promise of Ramadan, is that there is an opportunity and an expectation to better yourself, to spend time with community, to do more with less, and to sort of walk away with a training that carries you as a better person throughout the rest of the year. And that's one of the most exciting things I think about it. So it's both a challenge and an exciting opportunity, because when else do you have the community supporting you as you try to pray more, as you try to give more charity, as you try to work more? And so that kind of community encouragement is my favorite thing.
All right. So this will be sort of our message that we send to people, both Muslims and non-Muslims. This is the essence of this month. This is what we're all about. This is why we go around and refuse that invitation for a glass of coffee or for a cigarette or something. It's very nice to show people what the meaning of this whole thing is, instead of them getting it from kind of deficient or mistaken sources.
Sure.
I had the honor of listening to all these takes about it. Let me tell you the truth. I lived in a Muslim country for most of my life, and the projections, the talk, the points that I just heard were new in some sense, and they were definitely valuable in a community like the one we're living. I congratulate you for this period, and I hope that you will have a holy, blessed, and productive month of Ramadan.
Yes.
One more time,
Yeah.
I'd like to thank you for coming here and talking to us and giving the audience this great opportunity. Thanks again to Zahra, Billoo, the Executive Director of the Council of American Islamic Relationships in San Francisco in the Bay Area.
Thank you.
Pleasure. And to Ismael Nass, the speaker and of the Islamic Network Group. Thanks a lot. We had the pleasure.
Thank you. I have the honor.
Thanks again to our listeners. Ramadan Kareem.